everyone. Welcome back to Hearts Set Above. I'm Georgia and Ellen. We're discussing as part of our series on things we learned when we were training to be therapists, but things we also think are applicable not just for people who are entering the counseling room, but also just for Christians and people who are trying to live faithfully. And as part of that series today, we're exploring presence and active listening and the things that fall under that. So yeah, I'm wondering where we kick this off. Yeah.
Well, I will share a little personal anecdote as we're kicking this off. I just got back from a therapy conference. These are brothers and sisters in the faith who are also mental health professionals, and we all got together for a little conference. And I thought it was so funny because one night we were all at dinner and we were discussing kind of like different modes of therapy that we each practice and different trainings we had taken. And there were these two clinicians / sisters in the faith, and they were talking about specific trainings that they had taken to treat trauma. And so for those that don't know, we all learn how to treat trauma in grad school. But because trauma is so complex and there are not just different presentations to trauma, but also different ways that people can experience trauma, it's often considered best practice to go get additional training to treat trauma specifically because it is so pervasive and so big and heavy in people's lives. So these two were talking about two different trainings that they had taken on trauma. And I thought it was so interesting because they both said practically the same thing, that really they spent a lot of money, a lot of time learning this new model of therapy to treat trauma. But they each said, we actually have less participation in the process of this, that when, we had to go to all this training to basically learn to be quiet and let the client do their own work, right? And I was like, wow. And I thought about this podcast that you and I had coming up because I thought, isn't that so funny that that is part of what we're talking about today, just being present, not fixing the problem, but holding space for that person. That is often what is so therapeutic, what is so healing, but you have to go get extra training. Like we're not, that doesn't come naturally to us. We have to go spend thousands, tens of thousands of dollars and a lot of time and effort to get a degree and a license that basically says we know how to be present when we can't fix the problem, right? But that's essentially what we're offering to people today is you can't fix the problem, but you can be present. And that's more healing than you realize.
Absolutely. I feel like a very common myth about studying counseling or training to become a therapist is this idea that you're taught how to respond to different problems. And you learn, oh, this is how you respond to, I don't know, trauma. This is how you respond to someone who goes through a breakup. This is how you respond to money issues. But ultimately, so much of our training is them saying, you don't know.
Right.
You don't know. And the important thing is to be able to trust the experience that is being given to you from the client and truly hear it and listen to it and to quiet your own self so that you can be with the client and their experience.
Unfortunately, right? I wish we could say yes.
Oh, yeah.
In grad school, I learned the math problem to what you're facing. Insecurity plus trauma equals this kind of treatment. But unfortunately, that's just not the way it works, right? And so you're right. The majority of the training that we received in school was literally drilling into our heads the humility of surrender. You don't know the answer. You can't take away this pain or this problem. You can't fix it. You can't give them a magical formula to make all this go away. But what you can do is be with them as they move through it. You can have that presence. We call it in a therapeutic space, a non-anxious presence, right? And I love that because what I see is people who don't have this training or don't have this skill in just being present with people, there is this anxiety to it. I get it. I feel it too. When my friends say, I'm having a terrible day or this terrible thing happened in my life, I feel responsible for trying to ease some of that pain for them. But I think when we look at Jesus's example of presence and connection in the Bible, it really is that non-anxious presence. I mean, look at his best buds who were crying because their brother died. He even knew he was going to raise Lazarus from the dead. But when Mary and Martha was so upset about it, he was with them in that grief, in that sorrow, in that pain. He wasn't like, no, stop, don't worry, don't cry, right? Like their pain did not make him anxious. It didn't make him feel like there was something on his shoulders to do to take away. He just was with people in the pain. And though we can't do it as well as Jesus does, that's what therapists learn. And that's what we want to help convey to our listeners today and kind of offer them some practicals in how to do that. So I think you used the term, Georgia, in the intro, active listening. What does that even mean? Active listening.
Yeah, I feel like it's a bit of a buzzword. There's almost, I don't know, like it's a funny thing to say. I feel like I'd come across it on TikTok, like it's buzzy.
Yeah.
But active listening, how would I describe it? I think it's this may sound like a ridiculous way to phrase it, but it's listening with the intention to listen, I think.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
That's a bit woo-woo maybe. But what I mean by
No.
that, I think, is that I know I have certainly been someone who's done this in the past, but I've so often listened to answer, listened to fix, listened to give my 2 cents, listened for the purpose of giving something back rather than just receiving what I'm being told. And on top of receiving it, I think also being interested in more of it, like really wanting to flesh it out with the person who I'm facing. And to me, I think that active listening is that. It's that listening to listen. It's listening to understand. It's listening to even help the person themselves understand it more deeply. It's so for the other than for yourself. That's my kind of woo-woo loose phrasing of it.
I love that. Listening with the intention to listen. Yeah, I think that's how it was taught to me too, although not with that wonderful of phrasing. But basically, it's not listening to respond. It's listening to listen, to understand. It's striving to understand. The way I would define it is you're striving to see that person, to really see and understand them, not to respond to their pain or give them a fix, right? So so I learned it in grad school that I don't remember all of them, but there were some tools to actively listen to someone. Things like, them too, because we've talked about them. Things like summarizing what they said, clarifying, asking for clarification. Do you mean this or do you mean that, right? Active listening does not mean not saying anything. It means listening with the intention to listen. I love that. So that means sometimes you're going to need to clarify. What do you mean by that? What does that mean to you? Or ask follow-up questions that help you draw out that story and that context. Another one is summarizing, repeat back in your own words what they said so that they know that you understood or striving to understand. I have a metaphor for that. It's really ridiculous, and I'm always searching for a new metaphor. But I call it catching the football. Of course, by football, I mean American football,
Yeah,
catching.
sure.
But I tell people in marital therapy, any kind of like when there's more than 2 or more people in my office, I always use this metaphor of catching the football, because I say before you can throw your message to someone else, you first have to catch what they're saying to you so that they're freed up to catch what you want to say to them. But the only way you can do that is by expressing to them what you've understood them to say. And the great tool for that is summarizing in your own words. And I would add validating what you can. I heard you say this. I might not agree with all of it, but here's what I can really validate in what you're saying. So I think those are some tools in order to actively listen. But here's a question. If I were a listener, I would ask, what do you do when because I think the anxiety of someone telling you something so deep and personal and difficult is we want to help take that pain away, right? And I think that's kind of the rub for people in active listening. It's so difficult not to strive to take that pain. But you're so great, but don't worry, it'll get better, right? That is not active listening, making promises, trying to take the pain away. That's not active listening, though it comes from a good place. So how do we respond when we don't know what to say, right? Someone just tells us, something really deep and dark or difficult in their life, and we want to say something like, don't worry, it's okay, or I love you, you're so great, but we don't know what else to say besides that. How do we respond? How do we navigate that?
That's a good question. Gosh, there's so many thoughts flying around my head in response to that. Like, part
Yeah.
of me, I think, believes there's power in, um I think ultimately what you want to do is hold back the desire to fix, really allow yourself to identify it as, I'm wanting to fix right now, and like have that as like an inner conversation in the moment. But ultimately it's like knowing it's something to hold back. Which is, I'm talking about something that happens in a microsecond. Like that's
Hmm.
like a real, I think that takes time to train. And so I think you can give yourself grace of like learning that will take time. But I think that's what we want to get to. And then I think alternatively, like what you're pay attention to the fact that you're responding to the person's distress. You're seeing their distress. And I think something in person-centered therapy is congruence, which is this idea of like harmony in your responses. It's like kind of being authentic, kind of being harmonious with your response. And so if something you're hearing someone who is in distress, you can say, gosh, this is distressing. You can share in the distress. You can go, I'm experiencing it with you. You can share in it. And I think that offering is powerful as an alternative to the fixing. But yeah, I think in that moment of wanting to fix, like training that inner conversation of like, this isn't mine to fix, I think, which is a hard conversation to get to with yourself. But I think that's where we want to get to so that we can make space for congruence, that kind of sharing in the distress with that person. I don't know. What do you
Mm.
think?
Yeah, I love that. I have a lot of thought because you're right. I don't think there's one answer to this question. What do we
Mm-hmm.
do when we want to take someone's pain away, but we don't have the power? How do we respond? There is no XYZ to that, right? It depends. And
Mm-hmm.
it all depends on what you're experiencing in the moment, what you feel that
Mm-hmm.
they might be experiencing in the moment. And there's just a bunch of different ways you could respond. We've mentioned some of them. When in doubt, you can summarize.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
can ask for clarification. You can, try to, like you said, see what they might be feeling or even share in it with them with that congruence, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think just what when you were saying that, it reminded me of this visual that I like to use in therapy. Because even as a, new practicing therapist, it was hard to, even though I learned all of this in grad school that we're talking about today, it was hard when a client shared something with me to not feel the pressure, the weight of fixing it for them, for taking away at least a portion of their distress. It was easy to merge that with my role as their therapist, that it's part of my job here to take away their distress. I think that's a big part of what we're talking about today. We have to get to this place of surrender where we recognize we don't have the control to take that pain away. But before I was able to get there, I came up with this kind of visual where instead of envisioning that my client was talking to me and I was holding what they were saying in my hands, basically holding the responsibility of having to respond to them, I just envisioned that I turned my body a little bit to the side and my client was still facing toward me, but I was facing, kind of perpendicular to them. So I was able to see what they were saying, but it would fly past me into God's hands where the real power is, right? Whether that person was a person of faith or not, I know that I don't really have power in that person's life. They do, and God does. And so I envisioned that what they were saying flew right past me, uh, and and landed in God's arms where the power lied. However, me turning allowed me to see what they were experiencing from a new perspective. Now I
Mm-hmm.
could see it more closely. I could see it without feeling burdened by the responsibility of taking the pain away. And when I took that lens away, that maybe I could fix some of this distress, it allowed me to see what they were describing in a new way. So I actually was better able to practice this presence with them and say, oh, wow, I see so much distress in you, even in your
Mm-hmm.
face when you're talking about this, or oh, you just went like this with your shoulders. That shows me you feel like something heavy maybe is you're carrying. Tell me more about that. What is that like for you? So I think when in doubt, we can try to summarize what we hear. We can clarify. But I think when in doubt, we can just get curious. What is that like? Tell me more. And then I think another one, like that's one of my go-tos is just getting curious. I learned that in grad school too. They were like, hey, you're not the expert in another person's life. They are. And so if you don't understand their experience, even though you felt sad before, you've never felt sad in their body and brain in this situation in their life. So get curious. But another thing I like to do is to just share what I'm feeling in response to what they're feeling, which is kind of like what you were saying, right? It's not just, I notice you're feeling distressed. Tell me more about that. Sometimes it's, I've told clients this, I feel angry over you. I feel protective over you, right? If I feel like I would want to be there and protect you in that moment that this terrible thing happened to you. And that's not trying to take the pain away, but that is exuding that congruence that you're discussing. Like, I'm feeling this alongside of you in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually had a situation this week with a client where I described something as unsettling. They were bringing something to me and I described it as unsettling. And it was interesting in the moment seeing that meant the world to them for it to be named as unsettling. Like, they hadn't had that before. And I think that's just like a small peek into like the power it holds to simply just like to name what you're witnessing, I think.
Yeah.
But I love what you said as well about this this kind of surrender element, I suppose, of having God ultimately be the one to take the burden of the distress and be the one to receive it because he is the most capable of holding it, and he is the one who's obviously going to redeem it at the end of the day, and like really recognizing him as that's his role and that's who he is, and that's not our role as the redeemer or the fixer or even the holder sometimes. I mean, maybe a temporary holding, but ultimately we want to hand it back to God. And I love that visual as like you get to see it flying past, and in the seeing it fly past you, you're then able to have this quite clear idea of like what's actually being conveyed here. What can I observe if I'm not fixing, I think that kind of having that filter of like, I'm not going to fix, so then what am I seeing instead? If I'm not looking to fix, what am I seeing? It's such a freeing distinction. And I think that's another element of like active listening and presence, which is ultimately it's a freeing way to be in relationship with other people.
It really is. And I can tell you just from personal experience, as an introvert who's also a very deep feeler and has big, big emotions. Well, that's the same thing. A deep feeler who has big emotions.
With
That's
big
exactly
emotions.
the same thing. Yeah. And I also have big emotions. But as someone who feels really deeply and is an introvert, which means I kind of have to, I have this internal process that I go through. I can't really process externally when other people are around. I know that it has felt very anxiety provoking for me I've even kind of limited the people that I'm close to in this world because I've thought like, I literally just can't handle it. If I take you into deep, deep into my heart, then I will love you so fiercely that I will feel so deeply over everything that goes on in your life. And because of that, I've had to like kind of keep people at arm's length sometimes because I'm like, I just don't have the capacity to take you into my inner circle here, And so, but I think a big part of that lack of capacity is my distortion that it's my responsibility to care. I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, so I feel like I have to protect everybody, right? Like it's my job. That's how I show love is getting angry for and protecting these people that I love. And you're right. It is so freeing to say, but it's also so grief-worthy to say, I just don't have the power. I wish I could. I had the capacity and the power to protect everyone that I love, clients and non-clients, right? I just don't. And so I think in order to get to this place of surrender, we have to, in some part, confront our egos, right? Because I think part of this comes from an ego of, I have the answer, put me on it, right? Like I've been through that. I could tell them what I did. I'll fix it for them right up, right? I think that's a part of it. But I think this ego is always coupled with our genuine care and concern for people. And when we confront that, we just don't have the power. We literally have to grieve in order to get to a place of surrender, that we live in a fallen world, that we are not perfect, that we don't have the capacity to protect everyone or give everyone the answer. And I think that feels like such a scary thing to grieve and surrender. Like nobody starts their day out thinking, oh, I really hope I get to grieve and surrender today.
Yeah.
But I do think that it freeing is exactly the word that I would use. When you can get to that place of grief and surrender, laying down your ego, it actually is really freeing because no longer is your capacity a concern here. You have infinite capacity to be with someone in that moment in what they're experiencing, and then leave it in God's hands because it's not really yours to carry for the long term.
Yeah, that just reminded me of my first ever time that I practiced being in front of another person when I was in my training. And obviously it was super scary. It was in front of a group of people. It was the first time. So, and my nature is like, I have to be good at something immediately. And so I had all of that anxiety as well, bubbling up. And it was just 2 minutes of listening. And I was frozen. I was utterly frozen because I was so stuck in that, like, knowing I can't fix, but really wanting to fix, being my instinct. And like, it was like this like really paralyzed state of like, I can't say anything because I have nothing to say if I'm not fixing. And in the feedback, it was at that point just like, okay, on a technique level, just reflect back, which is the summarizing. It's like, if you have nothing to say, start with what you can reflect. Like, what emotions did you hear? What story did you hear? What are they trying to convey? Like start with that. And I think, at that point it was technique, but over time it can become just your presence. You can become that non-anxious presence when it becomes a part of the way you just move through the world. And I was going to say about the ego thing, it came back to me. But I think the way you described the ego thing and the fact that it's like there's an intention there to like care and like want to like take care of the people that you love and protect them. It reminds me of internal family systems, which is an approach we've discussed, but it's the idea of acknowledging like, this is a good part of me, this is something that wants good things, but it's misguided in its approach, and it needs to be sort of redirected towards like the surrendering to God, which means that, often these harder conversations may require a time afterwards where you are spending that time with God to really go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. That's really tough. What am I going to do? Okay, fine. It's not me. It's you. What are you going to do? Okay, fine. I don't know. Then it's in your hands. Amen. Like sort of like really having that time with God to go there and to struggle with him, but then ultimately reach that place of like, okay, I'm sad I can't fix this. I am sad that is not in my power. I do have that grief and it's yours. And you are more capable than I. So it just may require that sometimes.
Yeah, I think you're so right. I think that's such at the foundation. That was a big part of, I know both of our grad programs was to work on, I heard it in my program called, what was it? What did they say? The self of person of self, something like that. Like you were supposed to work on yourself as a person in order to be able to help others in their personhood, And there's even like a therapeutic model called the person of self. That can't be it, but it keeps coming to my mind. Anyway, that's a big part of working effectively with people in therapy, or even, for our listeners who are not therapists, in relationship with people, in effective relationship with people, is to know thyself to some extent, right? So that you can say, wow, when you're sharing this, I'm feeling so sad. I'm feeling so angry, so protective over you, right? Like you have to have some connection internally. And even if it's the part of you that says, I want to fix this for them, I want to give them the solution, being graceful with all parts of you. You're right. There are no bad parts. But some of them are very misguided. And so we can come alongside of our parts the same way we would come alongside another person and have compassion for them, even if we don't let them rule in the moment of that conversation with that other person. And I love that you used the word reflect, because I was trying to think of it and I couldn't remember it. But I know that's in, kind of the model that I was thinking of, this non-anxious presence. And that's often what I tell my clients in my very first session with them. I tell them, my job is not to fix, like I have no answers to your life that you don't have. But my job is to act as a mirror and to reflect back to you what you're describing and your values and your feelings and your, hopes for your life. And right, just like when we look in the mirror, we can say, "Oh, you know what? That is not what I wanted my hair to look like today," or "Oh, this outfit does not look the way that I thought it would." In the same way, when you have someone reflecting back to you, it helps you to clarify what you want in your values, in your goals, even in what you feel, right? So I've struggled with this too in my early years of therapy, being a therapist, is I would say like, "Oh, you must feel so sad," right?
Yeah.
And my client would say, "No, I don't feel sad. I feel this," and I'm like, "Oh," and I thought I would feel like, "Oh man, I failed. I didn't get the right answer," right? But it doesn't matter. It's not about me. It's about them. It's not that I'm trying to get the A plus in, summarizing what they're feeling. It's that I want them to clarify. It doesn't matter what I say. If someone just expressed something really sad to me and I said, "Oh, it sounds like you feel surprised," and that was totally off, it doesn't matter what I say. What matters is then they have an opportunity to say, "It's not surprised, it's more disappointed. And that is the goal of our time together, is for me to reflect so that they can whittle down what they're feeling, what they're wanting, what they really want to express, so that they can know their own selves better," right? So I think that's such an important word for people to be aware of here, is reflect. And when in doubt, reflect back what you hear them saying and let them clarify it based on your reflection. That doesn't mean you
Yeah.
have failed. It means you're doing something right.
Yeah. And if anything, the safety they feel to correct speaks volumes about the relationship that you've built.
Uh,
It's like they feel able to go, "Oh no, actually," like, rather than feeling like, "Yeah, sure, whatever you say,"
right.
like, I think that like, I don't think that's an indication, as you said, of failure. It's an indication that this person feels safe enough to clarify with you. They feel safe enough to try and figure out what they're feeling and really, as you said, like, carve it out and shape it, which is, yeah, so important as like something that can occur from active listening and from being a non-anxious presence.
Yeah. So we've talked about a lot today. We're trying to dispel the myths of becoming a therapist for someone so that they can be a better friend, a better parent, a better,
Yes.
be better in their relationships. We've talked about active listening and some components of that, right?
Mhm.
Reflecting, clarifying, summarizing. We talked about having a non-anxious presence like Jesus, right? Just being there to be there with them, not to
Mm.
fix the problem, and what you have to confront and able to do in order to be able to do that. You have to confront your ego. You also, but compassionately, right? Anytime you deal with your parts, you have to be compassionate with them. But you also
Mhm.
have to confront your grief in living in a fallen world, not being perfect, and surrendering to God's ultimate power in that. And then, we discussed this earlier, that kind of a key in all of this, the under thread in all of this, is curiosity, right? Not this
Mhm.
like, I want to know for my own gratification, but just
Yeah.
what is that like? And I'm not just saying curious about the content, but curious about the context, the story, the
Mm.
experience. You're feeling, it looks to me like you're feeling this way. What is that like for you? Tell me more about that, right? Like this curiosity that opens up the story, draws out the experience. I want to
Mhm.
ask Georgia, maybe we can share some personal experiences when this has happened to us, just in our personal life or with someone else.
Mhm.
Um, what has it been like for us? We've shared what it's like for us to offer this to our clients. What is it like for us when other people have offered this presence to us? Like, does anything come to your mind when I say that?
Hmm. Um, oh, I might need a moment to think about it. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, did
I'll share
something come for
mine. What do
you?
you think?
Yeah, go for it,
Yeah.
yeah.
So actually, just because it's at the top of my mind, because it just happened while I was at this therapy conference, we had to do, of course, right? It's a conference with a bunch of therapists who are speakers at a therapy conference. So we did a lot of woo woo stuff, right? Like there was like, take a moment, close your eyes, imagine this or that, right? There's a lot of those kinds of moments. And in one of those exercises that we did, we're supposed to turn to the person next to us, and we were supposed to share just the emotion of a recent memory that was a positive memory. But so we weren't supposed to share the context, but just the emotion. So I turned to my person next to me and I said, wow, okay, just the emotion. I felt joy and connection and also a little grief. And then she shared with me what she felt. And then, after this, we were kind of done with the exercise part of it. I said, I really want to know the context of what I want to know, the context of what you were feeling. She said, I'll share mine if you share yours. So I shared mine. And it was the night before I was FaceTiming my kids to say goodnight. And my 3.5-year-old, who's autistic, said, I miss you, Mommy, which is, first of all, the longest sentence I think he's ever said. And second of all, the way he said it is what really stood out to me. My son is very echolalic, so he has a lot of scripts in his brain and he repeats them often, right? And when he does, he kind of has this high-pitched sing-songy voice because a lot of what he memorizes is songs. So if he said, I miss you, Mommy, in that voice, it would have sounded like, I miss you, Mommy, like very scripted. But he didn't. He said it in this very low, raspy, monotone voice that he doesn't have very often. In fact, I've only heard it one other time. And he said it, and to me, I've characterized that as his real voice, right? Like that's how he sounds when he's actually conveying something he thinks or feels, not when he's just scripting something that he's heard before. So I was sharing, with her that I felt such joy in that moment and connection with him, but also some grief because it made me realize, whenever you have that moment of joy with your child who has special needs, you realize it's a moment of joy that shouldn't be joyful. It should just be really normal, right? It kind of brings up all that grief of, I've only heard his real voice twice in my life, right? And this is the longest sentence with 4 words that I've ever heard him say. So it brought joy, but also grief with it. So anyway, she had such a great response. And this, I'm telling you, this is someone who's been a therapist for a very long time. She has walked ahead of life in me. She knows way more than I do. She's way smarter than me. She, way better therapist, right? Like cannot say enough how she has a PhD. And I can't say enough how much better than me she is. And all she said was, because I ended it, I was starting to cry. And I said, I don't even know what his voice sounds like. And I started crying. She said, I don't even know what his voice sounds like. And then, of course, that made me cry even more. That's all she said, guys. Like, that's all she said. She just literally repeated exactly what I said. But it wasn't the words she said, right? You're even getting emotional hearing that, right?
I'm like, you guys can't see, but I'm like hand on heart at the moment. Like, that is.
But it was not the
poignant.
words she said. It was the way she said it. She wasn't worried about solving my problem. She wasn't going to tell me, oh, you know what? You should get him in a new therapy, get him in speech therapy, right? Like what someone else might say, oh, you should get him in some speech therapy. Oh, you should record it next time so you can listen back to, I don't know what people would say, right? She just was sitting there so relaxed. She knew she couldn't solve my problem. She couldn't take away this pain, but she just put her hand on her heart, just like you did, Georgia, and said, I don't even know what his voice sounds like. She just literally reflected exactly what I said. And it was so healing to feel presence, to feel companionship in that moment of joy mixed with grief. So that is a memory that comes to mind for me, even from a fellow therapist, that exemplifies how to offer that non-anxious presence. It is not rocket science, right? Like she didn't go to years and years of school, have so many letters after her name in order to learn how to say, you don't even know his voice. No, she didn't learn that. She just learned how to be present, how to not feel like she has to take the pain away, and how to feel her own concurrent pain alongside me in that moment.
Yeah. Wow. That is such a powerful story. It's like she just tuned in to a deeper level of what was happening.
Yeah.
Like it's you could have said anything as like the last words that you said when you were sharing your story, but that she tuned into something that was beyond the words of the moment. But that's
Yes.
so powerful. I do have a story that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Mine is I was in uni and I was with a friend, and I was just kind of I was sort of rattling off just all the things I have to do at the moment and all the things I feel about what I have to do, and it was this very fast pace. I was like 100 miles a minute, like just da 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 da. I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it because I have to do it. And like this really intense. And in that moment, I was really trying to be strong, I think, and I was trying to be like, I'm capable, I can do it. It's just that I have to do it. Like she'd asked me how I was, and I was like, just being really like, I was really trying to be like, I'm not going to break, and and then she. And then I stopped speaking, and she let it be quiet for a moment, which I think was the first thing. She let it be quiet, like she allowed for a moment of silence. And then she just went, it sounds like you need to take a really deep sigh. And and then we both sighed together. And like, for me, that was so significant because a sigh didn't complete my to-do list. It didn't like tend to what I was like. It didn't like fix anything. But she saw something, which was like probably my exhaustion and my sense of just like overwhelm, and just saw the need for a deep breath. Like, she saw something somatic, you know? And I think tuning into that I felt really seen, of like, it was a very like beautiful moment of attunement when we both sighed together. And again, there was no fixing. I just then was like, yeah. And it just sort of released, sort of like, okay, yeah, this is, and it allowed me to go, this is hard. I'm finding this hard. And I think it was that acknowledgement of this is hard without saying this is hard. It's like you needed a big sigh. So yeah, and that was just a friend who hadn't had years of training, but just kind of probably tuned into her own sort of like, this is exhausting. Like, so I feel like I need to sigh. You probably need to sigh, you know. But that was important.
To your to-do list. I need to sigh,
exactly. But yeah, I think that just these are things that anyone can do in these conversations.
And I love that you mentioned silence. In fact, that's something I thought about throwing in here. But once you get to this place of not having to fix the problem, not having everything fall on your shoulders, you can utilize silence so much more effectively. I remember that was a big piece of feedback in my grad school and beyond in supervision, when people were like, you know, you just take a pause before you respond. Like, utilize silence. I think sometimes my clients now probably think I utilize silence too much. They're like, can you please say something here?
Please say something.
Especially in support groups, I'm known for like allowing the silence to just be there and let other people sit in it. But sometimes that's uncomfortable for us to sit in our emotion or to sit in the emotion of others. But I think your friend handled that so well. She was like, she let the reverberation of your distress fill up the room. And it kind of made it so much more poignant what she said, right? Wow. Sounds like you need to take a big sigh. I don't think if she had responded so quickly after you said that, it would have had quite the same effect than her letting that distress hit the walls, right? And then saying, whoa, it kind of like tuned you into how much it was, right? Like how the bigness of what you were sharing. So yeah, I love that silence. And I think too, just as like a side note, I think people are always interested in what the experience of a therapist, because it's sort of like this presented in our modern culture as this mystical experience of being a therapist, because I get it. We are not our own person in the therapeutic context. We are a mirror. We are there as a space to hold for the client. Like, we're not there for ourselves. So I get it that a lot of our clients, I think, probably think like, what are they really like in their personal lives? And they just don't know. Same way when you think about your doctors or something like that. What are they really like? They're here for me. Who are they as a person? I will tell you that on this side of the therapeutic, experience, those are some of my most memorable moments in therapy as well, is when I'm just present in someone's pain or someone's distress or someone's difficulty. It's not when I don't really remember many of the times that I've said something really profound that has helped a client. I do really remember sharing in some deep moments with people when we were just there together. And I think that comes from, I remember that a time with you, Georgia, right? Like, I remember a specific time when we were both brought to tears by working together. And that was such a memorable, I'm sure there were multiple, but there was such a memorable moment. Yeah, where just like, we're just in this distress together. And I think what allows us to get there more easily, maybe as therapists with the training we've had, is that we know what people really need is not the answer to their problem, right? Like that, I can't tell you how many times I heard that in grad school. The answer to the problem is not really the answer to the problem, or the solution is not really the solution that they think it is. The solution is connection. That's really what people need. So you telling your friend your to-do list and everything that was hard about that, if she said, great, let me take care of 1 through 5 on your to-do list, that would have been nice. Like, for sure, that could have helped you. I don't think it would have helped you as much as her connecting with you in that moment, just acknowledging, reflecting to you what you felt and what she felt, reverberating off of you. Because what you really needed in that moment was not for things to be taken off of your to-do list. It was to be seen in your distress. And she did that so well. And so I think that's the perspective shift that we have as therapists is, yes, this person needs some tangible, practical help in their life. I don't have the power to give them that. But what I can do is see them and connect with them in this. And that's actually more valuable to them. It's going to help them more than if I were to come clean their house or empty their dishwasher. That is, short-term help. But the long-term help I can give them is to connect and teach them how to connect with themselves in these distressing moments.
Yeah, because it meets the deeper needs that we all have of to be seen, to be like heard. Like these are like key things that we all desire that aren't fixed by acts of service, or I mean maybe they are on some level actually, but I think there is something that presence offers in terms of meeting those very basic core needs that often we're trying to convey in those moments of like I'm stressed or I need help, or in sharing anything, and so I think that's such an amazing thing that we can offer. And as you said, it's in a way, it's more valuable than completing a to-do list for someone because it isn't temporary. It can really create a connection that is long lasting. It can like be a foundation for a really strong connection even. So it builds.
And what you just said, I don't know why I thought of this when you said that, but because it does meet some core needs when we see people and connect with them, either in their pain, their joy, right? We can reflect in someone's joy just the same that we do in their pain or their distress. I think on a zoomed out, unseen level, what we're really doing is by seeing someone, by connecting with them, is acknowledging their worth, capital W, the worth that God has given them, right? When we say, who you are is worthy of my attention and my care and my understanding, we're acknowledging you were made in the presence of the Lord Most High, and you bear his image, even in a fallen way. And I want to know that. I want to know you. I want to be connected to you. I want to understand. That's so much bigger of a gift than I'll come clean your dishwasher, or I'll come, mop your floors or whatever. Though that is great too, because that is saying you are worthy of my service, and that is great too. But saying like you as a human are worthy of my attention, my understanding. Your worth is valuable and appreciated by me. I think that is such a core need that we all have, and because we don't live in Eden, it's a raw need. It's a throbbing need for all of us. We're always that need is always apparent. That need is always felt. And so when we can be that for other people, just be that presence for them, just hold space for them with them, it's more valuable than we think it is. It's way more valuable than offering a fix.
Absolutely. And I think that this really brings it round of like why this is also so important for people who are trying to follow Jesus in their everyday life and in their relationships. Because even as you said just then about us being out of Eden, I truly believe this is kind of all a part of kingdom come. This is all a part of like the small acts of restoring that we are capable of doing. Obviously, we can't do the capital R restoration. We can't do that work. But these are these small moments of helping someone feel seen and heard and get in touch with their worth and get in touch with the way that they are seen through God's eyes. That's kingdom come in our one-to-one relationships. And so it's why, this is part of how we act as, this is how we follow Jesus in our listening.
In a fallen world. Yeah, you're right. It's an echo of Eden that we can provide for people this side of heaven is to say, I see you. And what I don't see, I want to understand more. And I just want to be here with you in this. Yeah. So that's our charge to listeners today is don't come up with fixes. Resist that urge to come up with fixes. Just be, capital B-E, in that moment with people. Strive to be the hands and feet of Jesus who is just present with people, that non-anxious presence. So yeah, thanks for tuning in to the Heart Set Above podcast today, and we will see you next time.